I think it's interesting that the problem card is the bat. The two most common uses of a bat are sporting equipment and hitting people. And I feel this speaks to the root of your distrust, suggesting you've been hurt by something with a similar dichotomy. In the short-term slot is Rosita offering a tomato. Now, not everybody likes tomatoes, but the important aspect of this card is the spirit in which Rosita is offering it. And I believe the common element between these two cards is that it's the context of the situation that's most important to pay attention to. Which leads us to the long-term solution card, Different Ernie. A reminder that it would be irresponsible to say treat all circumstances as if they were the same. So instead, try this. Be willing to offer people the benefit of the doubt, and instead ask yourself, can you trust the situation? I believe that situational skepticism will serve you well. The Sesamerot has spoken. So the problem card is the igloo, typically a sign of protection, isolation, or defense. But it can also represent making a place for yourself with the tools you've been given. So I guess the problem is being defined as, if the piano's been given strings and hammers, which one is the thing that it is? Now I think it's interesting that both the short and long-term solution cards are groups of flying creatures, because one is an insect and one is a mammal. One is considered beautiful, the other is considered spooky. Really, the only classification that unites them is flying creature. So the Sesamerot has reached the grand conclusion that a piano is simply an instrument. That is a cop-out. You know what, Sesamerot? We need an answer, so I'm drawing a clarification card. Oh, come on! No, we are getting an answer. Come on. Sesamerot spoken. The oval, among other things, is a symbol of unequal cycles. Careers are a great example, and purple is a color of both passion and logic. I take this as a sign that you are passionately invested in gaining a career that helps others. In the short-term slot is Oscar offering an orange, often a sign that we should be aware of the context of the gifts that we are giving. Consider that while both schools of medical science have at their heart people who desire to help others, osteopathy is, for better or for worse, tainted by its reputation. And so if we address the question with the cold blue logic, as represented by the blue triangle in the long-term slot, podiatry may turn out to be a clearer and less stressful path towards your goals. But who knows, maybe podiatry is just your way of getting your foot in the door, and you may choose to extend yourself into osteopathy later. Those puns doing anything for you? Anyway, the Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem card is the Count looking at the night sky. As we know by habit, the Count likes to quantify things, and wants to know if this is truly the brightest star in the sky. Of course, looking at the night sky is also a sign of fortune reading, so let's evaluate. In the short-term slot is the 6 of birdseed, a lovely gift for Big Bird, and possibly even Bert so he can feed his pigeons. And hey, the Count might even enjoy 6 bags of birdseed because he can count them. But you know, what are Zoe and Elmo going to do with 6 bags of birdseed? This is a reminder that not every gift is for everyone. So perhaps your girlfriend's gift of tarot is not something that you're into. The question is, are you okay with her sharing this gift with others? Now, the grown-up answer is, of course, she's allowed to have interests outside of mine. It would be childish to expect everyone to have the same interests you do. And childishness is how we end up alone. The Sesamerot has spoken. Whoa, looks like we ended up with Oops All Berts. I believe this is a case where the Sesamerot is showing us a story, with your past being represented by Bert operating the vacuum cleaner, a sign that you've had to clean up a lot of messes, but also a sign that you have been picking yourself up each time and cleaning up and preparing for the next case. Now, as we move on to the short-term slot, let's remember that the Pentagon is often a sign of mysteries, and of course, Bert loves pigeons. So after preparing a place, Bert is also teaching himself to open up to those that he loves. Now in the long-term slot, we're seeing the dry card, which is, of course, the opposite of the wet card, another cleansing card. I believe this is a sign that this is what you have been preparing for this whole time. I see a future for you where you no longer have to do this cleansing alone. Never forget, every experience is there to prepare you for the next one. Go for it. The Sesamerot has spoken. Spoiler one, and the Sesamerot's being a smartass again. Unbelievable. Okay, in the short-term slot is the Gray Pentagon. That is a sign of intriguing mysteries. I think Victoria's Secret qualifies as an intriguing mystery. I believe it's appearing in the problem slot because of how intriguing this mystery is. We really want to know what's Victoria hiding there. However, and I don't think there's a way I can sugarcoat this, Zipper followed by Kite is quite possibly the strongest way the Sesamerot has of telling you to be quiet and go away. Now, I like to think this is because Victoria has a secret so dark and mysterious that even the forces of chaos refuse to reveal it. But you know what? Let's see what happens if we push back a little. Clarification card. No! Finally, a straight answer from one of these. So the problem's defined by the quilt card. Which answer problem tends to mean that we are considering the whole and disregarding the source of its parts. We look at the cereal, we see, oh, it's got liquid in it with a bunch of solids floating in it, we eat it with a spoon. Hey, it looks like soup to me. Now in the short-term slot, we got the vacuum, and the long-term slot is the Nine of Waters. This could be inviting us to tidy up our definitions of words, and to consider the relative importance of the liquid components, in which case we would remember that soup broth is typically made with some sort of a stock, while milk, pasteurization aside, is just a base ingredient. Now that's big brain talking, but let's remember that the Sesamerot is a bit of a stinker, and that 9 sounds like a specific German word. So the Sesamerot is saying, let's make this clear. No. The Sesamerot has spoken. In the problem slot is Amazing Mumford holding an alligator. Given the context of your question, I'd say this is a sign that you have gone above and beyond in your job, and taken on some risks that immediately affect you. Certainly there's something that needs to be recognized, which brings us to the 5 of nightcaps, which can also be a stand-in for wizard hats. A reminder that you're the one bringing the magic 5 days a week. I believe this is the Sesamerot reminding you to know your worth and make sure that they know it too, and to not be afraid to advocate for yourself. Perhaps a sign that you should offer them an opportunity to pay you what you're worth. Now in the long-term slot, we got Snuffy wearing socks. I believe this is the Sesamerot reminding you that walking away is always an option. And I believe this read in general is a reminder that self-care is vital. So if they're making you lose sleep and they're not covering your fundamentals, then hey, tell them where they can stick the alligator. The Sesamerot has spoken. The problem here is defined by the different Ernie card. I interpret this as a sign that what you are seeking is change, which is healthy. I mean, given that change is inevitable in life, actively seeking it is very proactive. Now the good news, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to show this one off, your long-term card is the 17 of Ladybugs, widely acknowledged as a sign of good fortune, but also believed to be a sign of transformation. So given the context of this reading, I'd say we're seeing some good signs in the event that you choose to change your environment. But how do we get from there to there? Well, that's where the 4 beanies comes in. Now, if 4 folks walked into Mr. Hooper's wearing the same beanie, you'd assume they're together, which is why the 4 beanies represents fellowship with others. I take this as a sign that you need to make sure your support network is in place. So make sure you got friends to help you and a backup plan. Good luck and happy travels. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem card is the 15 of trucks. I take this as a sign that you were literally driven out of your job, which speaks to the idea that somebody higher up may have had an agenda. Now, the orange hexagon in the short-term slot invites us to remember the reality of the situation. The Human Resources Department is not there to protect you, they're there to protect the company. And chances are a higher-up with an agenda would have already gone through HR prior to your dismissal. So the chances of them being on your side at all are slim to none. Unless you happen to produce a little surprise for them. That's the alligator in the long-term slot. You see, HR's there to protect the company from a legal standpoint. So if you can produce some evidence of what you're saying, i.e. something that can bite them in the butt legally, well then suddenly HR's your best friend again. In short, unless you got something to back up those allegations, then it's probably best to move on. The Sesamerot has spoken. Well, I gotta say, it doesn't look good for the Count, because he didn't come when his name was called. Now, the umpire card in the problem slot is probably a reminder that we need to follow the rules on this one. It is a rare thing for a chaos art to very specifically call for order, With that said, let's have a look at the short-term and long-term slots. In short-term, we've got the one and duckies, and in the long-term, we've got the purple oval. And of course, we're meant to see that comes before that. I believe this is a way of saying in the beginning there were no things, and then there was one thing. And then another thing, an egg-like shape that's purple. Hey, I seem to recall that the Count's skin is purple. Maybe this is baby Count. He showed up after all. Anyway, first there was nothing, then there was a thing, and then there were some things. And thus, when there were things to count, the Count was created. So, there you go. The Sesamerot has spoken. Okay, this is a pretty interesting read, actually. See, your problem card is the low Super Grover, and Super Grover only lands when there's a problem to solve. I believe this is a sign that you are looking for the problem you were built to solve. Now, what's interesting is that the short-term solution card is a 16 of feathers, but the long-term is the 9 of butterflies. Feathers are, of course, the leavings of flying creatures, and butterflies are creatures that fly after undergoing a transformation. But they also have a different way of flying, as compared to birds. Putting it together, my reading is this. There is something within your soul that calls you. Something you dream of but fear that you are not capable of. The Sesamerot is saying seek out evidence of those that do that very thing, so that you may be transformed by its teachings and innovate upon it. I believe an apprenticeship or an education is in your near future. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem slang is low-key, which apparently means low intensity. I believe this is a sign that as bad as you've experienced it, you have not experienced it at its worst yet. Which brings us to your short-term solution slang, which is beat, which apparently means they have a full face of makeup. With that said, it's also the 7 of hearts, a sign of imagination and fantasy. I take this as a sign to pretty yourself up and get yourself ready for new opportunities. And more importantly, to go after the ones that really tickle your fancy. Now, your long-term slang is sus, meaning suspicious. I believe this is you know what? I just realized I haven't come up with a name for this deck yet. The Sesamerot. Wait, really? You know what? We'll work on it. Anyway, ask pointed questions and advocate for yourself during the interview process. The Sesamerot has spoken. Well, we're off to a good start. Now, I feel like the pizza triangle card in the problem slot is pretty clearly defining what the question is. However, it pairs remarkably well with the blue triangle in the short-term slot. On the one hand, it could be inviting us to break this question down using cold blue logic. On the other, it could just be saying, shut up and eat the pizza before it gets cold. This brings us to the long-term slot, which is the 2 of boats. Now, the thing with these 2 boats is they both look like they're going in the same direction, and that's why this represents 2 journeys. But you can't really tell from the context of the picture where these boats are going. They could have 2 completely different destinations. I believe this is a reminder that traditional pizza and deep dish pizza are both designed to satisfy different cravings. I believe this is the Sesamerot saying that both forms of pizza are valid, and everyone deserves to eat pizza, even the weirdos that like deep dish. The Sesamerot has spoken. The 13th of Mackerel speaks of a situation in which everybody has a slightly different perspective on it. I believe this card appears in your problem slot because you have chosen, shall we say, a more pessimistic approach to how you look at it. Which is perfectly understandable. Having a bunch of spiders in your apartment is real bad, especially if they're not cutting in their share to rent. But now let's look at the short and long-term solution cards. The short-term solution being the tie, which I believe is a sign that the spiders are there doing a job. Hey, maybe they are paying rent, they're just doing it in the form of their labor. And don't forget, labor has value. Now in the long-term slot, we see the full Cookie Monster. Considering that a spider's job in this particular case would probably be to catch and eat insects, this is probably a sign they're eating well. All things considered, I'd say explore the idea that you may have a bug problem. Good luck to you. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem card is Snuffy wearing socks. This is often a sign of needing to explore the limits of our own comfort zones. Perhaps an invitation to ask yourself, why have I not made content already? And once you address that question within yourself, you're ready to move on to the short-term slot, which is Rosita holding a tomato. Now, some people like tomatoes, and some people don't like tomatoes. But that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is that Rosita has a tomato to offer. A reminder that when you offer your gifts, not everybody's going to be into them, but like Mike Nelson from MST3K used to say, the right people will get it. Now in the long-term slot is the 9 of butterflies, a sign of the freedom that comes with transformation. I believe this is a sign of the transformative nature of content as you create it for the public. Do not be afraid to tweak and make improvements to the formula as you are creating content. And have fun with it. Good luck to you. The Sesamerot has spoken. Okay, this is interesting. We have X11Z. There should be a Y here, so I believe the short-term slot is telling us why. See, one of the meanings of the 11 of Wimes is that it represents the fundamentals. And the Sesamerot was saying, if you've mastered the fundamentals, then why do you still doubt yourself? See, the X-ray card typically represents introspection, and right now it's sitting in your problem slot. Your tarot deck is quite likely reflecting your self-doubt right back at you. And that's the part that you need to shut down, hence the zipper in the long-term slot. See, things like attitude, personality, the old razzle-dazzle, nobody comes out of the gate with those things fully developed. You gain those as your experiences make things more natural for you. I believe the Sesamerot is saying your training is complete, now go take the plunge. And in doing so, you will eventually find your voice. The Sesamerot has spoken. The problem card is Oscar holding an orange. Although it should probably be a grapefruit, am I right? Now, I've said in the past that the appearance of Oscar does not necessarily mean bad things, but given the question, this is the problem card, we're going to take it as read. Now, the Sesamerot cuts to the point on this one. The short-term slot is the 11 of Wands, which can represent, fundamentals, the basics, that sort of thing. And for the vast majority of fans, the very reason that they're fans has a lot to do with the work of Vince McMahon. The thing is, eventually, in any cycle, there has to be a next step. Everything thrives by evolving past its fundamentals. And Vince McMahon may be having a hard time accepting that, which is why he sees the future of wrestling as fish coming to eat his worms. So based on this read, I think the problem with Vince McMahon is, he once pitched a wrestling storyline where he was the father of his daughter's child. The Sesamerot has spoken. In the Sesamerot, the Pentagon is often a sign of mysteries and unknowns. The birdhouse Pentagon in the problem slot speaks of wanting to open up to others to share what is inside. However, the gray Pentagon in the short-term slot warns that there may still be some unknowns to you as well. The willingness is there, but there may be some preparation required. I believe that's why we're seeing a green rhombus in the long-term slot. The rhombus is itself a symbol of perspective and understanding. I believe this may be a sign of gaining some of the benefits that a diagnosis could give you. Things such as information, language, a path towards treatment. And of course the gravitas that comes with having your words backed up by a medical professional. So while a diagnosis is not strictly speaking necessary, it seems that your words would carry a far greater weight if you had the diagnosis to back you up. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem card is the 5 of Nightcaps. I believe one interpretation here is that it could indeed be a problem to interrupt your cat's rest. However, it could also be asking, is it okay if I relax a little on this one? And the good news is there's nothing about this drawing that suggests the consequences are lethal. That said, the short-term slot is the white square. I believe this is a reminder to think about what life is like without a kitty on your lap. Boring, bare bones, you're surviving, but you're not thriving. And to have a life where you have a kitty on your lap, well, you must accept some bad with the good. And that's where the long-term slot comes in, the one of duckies. A reminder to side with that one true companion that makes this wonderful life of yours possible. So yeah, you could survive standing up, but what kind of a life would that be? The Sesamerot has spoken.